Hey guys, and in today's video I'm going to be giving you 5 simple tips to get better at sum of ranks. So tip number 1 is only practice for events that are at your upcoming competitions. So the reason you want to do this is because if you're practicing for events that aren't at your next competition, you're not going to be able to, that means you're giving time to an event that you're not going to be competing in for a while. Whereas you might as well spend that time improving an event that is at the competition, at your next competition, so that you can get that result better at that competition. So it's kind of understandable if you've got an event that's really holding you back and you want to make sure that you really improve in that. But as far as strategy goes, it's definitely best to always be practicing events that are at your next competition, so that in between competitions you always improve and you can always do well in those events. Because if you're practicing random events that aren't at the competition, that means that it's possible that at that competition your sum of ranks won't improve, because you won't improve in the events that are held at that competition. And you want to be constantly improving your sum of ranks, because sum of ranks is it's quite a time consuming thing to get good at, because you have to improve in all the events. Tip number 2 is don't practice for all events. So I made this mistake once at New Zealand Nationals 2017. I pretty much tried to spread all my practice into all the events that I was competing in at that competition, and there were a lot of events. It was a 3-day competition, so yeah, pretty much what ended up happening was I didn't get good results in anything really. Like the best I got was sort of satisfactory results, and that was just, it wasn't a good competition for me. It was kind of disappointing because I improved a tiny bit in most events, which looking back is really what I should have expected, because if you're just trying to practice all the events, you're not going to be able to improve a lot in any of them. You're just going to improve a little bit in all of them, which I don't think that'll even out. And it doesn't give you a satisfying feeling after a competition to have only broken your PB by like 0.1 each time. It's not very good. You want to be able to sort of cut off a solid amount of time from quite a few events at each competition. And to do that, you need to make sure that you pick a few events for each competition, unless it's a small competition in which you could probably practice all the events. I wouldn't recommend practicing any more than like 6 events at each competition. It's okay to practice a little bit for some events, but you always want to have some core events that you're trying to improve on, and pretty much only practice those events. Tip number 3 is make sure you find your weaknesses in sort of events that you're ranked badly in, so that you practice those events more and get better rankings in them, so that you're better well-rounded and have a better sum of ranks. So for me, 3x3 is definitely one of my worst events. So for my next competition, I'm going to practice a lot of 3x3, try and get that ranking down, so that it's not holding my sum of ranks back. Because if you've got one really, really bad event, let's say you've never competed in an event, you definitely want to get onto that, because that'll be something that's really holding your sum of ranks back, because that ranking will be really bad, because then everyone else is ahead of you. Or if it's just a competitive event that you haven't invested much time in, you're going to want to put a bit of time into practicing that event. So, sum of ranks is all about strategy, what events to practice at what time. Because sometimes, let's say you're just looking at your national sum of ranks, it can change quite quickly. Maybe suddenly lots of people get into a certain event, and then you kind of had an okay ranking in it. Then suddenly it will get really bad because everyone's practicing it. So you just need to look out for that sort of thing going on, because things can change quite quickly, and then you might not notice why you're suddenly falling so behind in sum of ranks, and it's just because you've got one event that you haven't practiced in a while that you thought you had a good ranking in, but you actually didn't, because lots of people improved in it. Because it's always changing. Sum of ranks is always changing, and sometimes it's hard to keep track of what's going on. Tip number 4 is make sure that you spend a decent amount of time practicing each event. So even if you're not practicing that many events, you want to have sort of decent sessions on them. you don't want to be on one event for only like 5 minutes and then switching to the next event, because it means that you don't have sufficient time to get better technique and properly improve in that event. So this isn't necessarily sum of ranks, but it's pretty much goes for everything. But I think in sum of ranks you can kind of fall into the trap of thinking, I need to switch between events quickly and I need to practice all these events, so I need to make sure that I'm not spending too much time on a single event, which is not the best way to go about it, because then you don't improve very much if you're just constantly switching. And I find it more enjoyable to sort of work on an event, spend enough time on it so that you can actually see some improvement. Because if you're just doing tiny sessions on an event, you're not really going to improve that much on that event. And tip number 5 is make sure that you always practice your core events. So I would say core events are the N by Ns pretty much, or I can narrow that down to about 3x3 and 5x5. So 3x3 is really useful because it helps you to improve at OH, all the N by Ns. It helps you to improve at feet and FMC. Doing 3x3 helps you improve on all sorts of events. So it's a core event, and because practicing 3x3 helps you improve at everything. And 5x5 also gives you sort of edge pairing skills and center building skills for other big puzzles. It can also help for Megaminx because of the look ahead. So big cubes are also really good. Big cubes can help 3x3 in turn, because it's like, harder look ahead, looking for a lot more pieces, looking through a lot more pieces. So things such as 5x5 and 6x6 and 7x7, I guess, they're all events that I would consider core events. But pretty much just the N by Ns in general. I wouldn't say 2x2 so much, but the N by Ns, they help you improve at lots of different events, even though you're only doing that event. Thanks for listening. I hope this was useful, and good luck at improving your sum of ranks. See you in the next video.